Looking at live pictures, they're still voting in Dover in New Hampshire right now as they're voting. Let's go back to David Chalian. David, more exit poll results coming in.
That's right, Wolf. We asked voters as they were leaving the polls today, what is the most important issue to you as you were voting in the New Hampshire primary? Once again, like we saw in Iowa last week, healthcare is the big winner here. 37% of these New Hampshire Democratic primary voters tell us that was the issue that mattered most to their vote. Climate change followed at 28%, income inequality at 19%, and foreign policy down at 11%. As you know, the battle over Medicare for All has been one of the defining policy battles in this campaign, and we're seeing again that a majority in this electorate support the idea. 58% of these New Hampshire Democratic primary voters support the idea of getting rid of private insurance in favor of a government-run plan. But I should note, liberals are driving this. The moderate conservative voters are actually opposed to it, but the liberals are sort of winning out on this policy debate here. Same thing we saw with free college tuition at public universities. Another key policy debate inside this field. 67%, more so than for Medicare for All, support free tuition at public colleges. 29% say they do not. And about that ideological makeup of this electorate, I think this is really important and telling. Just the shape of the electorate, what it looks like. 21% call themselves very liberal. 40% say somewhat liberal. So that's a 61% of the electorate on the liberal side, whereas you have 36% moderate, 3% call themselves conservatives. You might expect that. It's a Democratic primary. But that's about 39% on the moderate conservative side of the equation. That's a 60-40 split of what this electorate tonight looks like ideologically in these early exit polls, Wolf.
Very interesting. You know, Jake and Dana, 61% describe themselves as either somewhat liberal or very liberal.
Yeah, but the number that's interesting here to me is the very liberal is 21% and moderate is 36%. And something to keep in mind comparing this New Hampshire primary vote versus the last time when Bernie Sanders won so overwhelmingly is, first of all, it's not just essentially a two-candidate race. Right? He's competing against many candidates. Second of all, the Sanders coalition today, if you talk to his advisors, is different than the Sanders coalition of 2016. The Sanders coalition today is there's more emphasis on voters of color and working class voters, not necessarily New Hampshire, which is not to say that he's not going to win New Hampshire. I have no idea what's going to happen. But his new coalition looks more like Nevada or South Carolina than this one does, because New Hampshire, there are a lot of working class voters in New Hampshire. Obviously, there's poverty in New Hampshire, but New Hampshire has a higher median income than most every state in the nation. I mean, it's like in the top 5. In addition, it's obviously a very white state, 94% white. So the question about whether or not New Hampshire is the place for Bernie Sanders like it was 4 years ago, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Right. If you look at the numbers and just kind of at a glance, these numbers do look good for Bernie Sanders, in theory, because the electorate considers themselves liberal.
Not to mention he's from right across the country.
Well, there's that, but just on these exit poll numbers and on the issue of replacing private insurance with a government plan, almost 6 in 10 say yes, and so forth.
But that's fewer than said it in 2016.
It's fewer than 2016, but more importantly, just anecdotally, again, I can't tell you how many voters I met who were self-described liberals, but they were at an Amy Klobuchar event. So it doesn't necessarily translate into the kind of candidate we think that this kind of voter will vote
Plus
for.
the electability argument.
Right.
Guys, we're getting more reaction to the breaking news. Also on the resignation of not one, not two, but 3 federal prosecutors in the Roger Stone case. That's straight ahead.
What's my safe flight story? My truck